Hello, everyone, and welcome to the University of Rhode Island Computer Science and Statistics. I'm sure by now you're wondering uh, why we've been fluctuating from one system to the other and installing different systems from Windows 10 to Linux to Windows Server, etc. Believe it or not, being a good security expert or a good security professional really depends heavily on how many systems you understand and how many systems you are exposed to. And having a good understanding of the Windows environment and the Linux environment is going to really give you various skills and understanding of the different operating systems, what they sit on, and how to use them. So, in today's lesson, we are going to talk about enabling one of Microsoft's newest offers on our Windows Server 2019. So, Microsoft is really making an effort to start working with its partners or collaborators to include some of the functionalities that developers and systems experts have called for many years. Okay. And that is to really figure out how to adopt the open source platform that most of us enjoy utilizing because of the flexibility that it has to offer. So, what we're going to learn how to do today is we are going to learn how to install and enable what is known as a Windows subsystem of our Linux environment. This feature is actually very cool because it really allows for us to do a lot of cool things in our Windows server. It, we can actually install a role known as the Windows subsystem for Linux. So that role is essentially a built-in Windows feature that allows for us to use instances of Linux. So we can kind of decide which flavor of Linux we would like to install or go with, and we can actually run the instance or the binaries of that Linux operating system. It's not a full-blown system, but it really allows us to interact with a Linux machine through our command line in Windows or our PowerShell. So it runs concurrently with Windows Server 2019 or Windows 10, so you can decide which version you want to set it up on. In our case, we're going to do it on Windows 2019. It's also a compatibility layer for Linux binaries, so we really want to use Microsoft's website to see which binaries it's updated and have adopted. And for the most part, it supports most of the most popular one. It allows for us to run Linux binaries directly in our Windows system. Again, it's a Linux distribution that can be installed on our Windows machines. It's a Windows subsystem for Linux, and it's designed for, and it's essentially really designed for developers and provides various Linux functionalities with, some limitations where there's certain programs and tools you can't run. You can't run programs that heavily rely on sockets, etc. But I'm sure that will change with time. It is not virtualization because it runs concurrently, again, with our Windows system. So we don't actually need to virtualize this in order to test it out. So let's take a look at how we can actually set this up in our Windows Server 2019. So once I open up my Windows Server 2019, I'm going to launch my server manager. Okay. Once I launch my server manager, I'm going to select add roles and features. When I select add roles and features, I'm going to click next. Okay, next. I'm going to specify the server that I want to use to add this role to. Okay. And then if I scroll down to server roles, you will notice that I don't have a Linux role. That is because this is actually not a role, but a feature. If I click on features and I scroll down, you will notice that I have the Windows subsystem for Linux feature that I can install and set up in my Windows Server 2019. Okay, so I'm going to click next, and it's going to allow me to install the Windows subsystem for Linux, and I'm going to click install to begin installing that particular subsystem. The installation may take a few minutes, but for the most part, it shouldn't take too long. And you'll notice here that a restart is pending. You must restart the destination server to finish the installation. So I'm going to click close, okay? And I'm going to restart my server, all right? So what I need to do before I restart it, okay, is let's actually restart our server. So we're going to X this out. We're going to go to start, and we're going to specify restart. And we're going to explain that it is for an operating system reconfiguration because we're adding a feature. And we're going to click continue to restart our server. Okay, so once our server restarts, I'm going to log back in. Okay. And my server should basically launch me back into my server manager. Okay. And you really won't notice anything because there's still a few configurations that we still have to do in order to finalize the Linux subsystem that we just installed. Okay. So let's take a look at some documentation so we could know exactly what it is that we are doing. So I'm going to open up my web browser, and usually you have to use compatibility settings. I'm going to click OK. And this is really to protect you because most servers, you don't typically go online with them unless you set that up. But for the most part, I would definitely avoid using my server to surf the web because that's, usually where, cookies and a lot of vulnerabilities come into play. So I'm going to do an https://docs.microsoft.com/en-us. You could just Google this, but I'd rather do it this way because I kind of know it. Windows Subsystem /install-on-server. Okay. This is going to bring me directly to the Microsoft website. I'm going to add this to accept it. Add. Okay. Then I'm going to close. Again, add, close. I don't want to be continued to be prompt. Okay. So here I am. Okay. So right now, I am at the Windows Server installation guide, and I see here exactly what I can install and set up as far as Linux distributions are concerned. Okay. If I go to initialize distro, you will notice that I can launch a distro, and then it really takes me through the steps of how I can launch it and really get some of the cool configurations in my Windows 10 machine. And it really explains how I can do various troubleshooting methods and some pretty cool and neat stuff that Linux has to offer that I can definitely take full advantage of. We're not going to do any of this fancy stuff. Again, if you take the higher level courses, you definitely will get into this. But for our case, I just want to introduce you to the basics of it. Okay. So I'm going to go back to install on Windows Server, and it's telling me that I need to first enable the feature and then run a few commands to make sure that it works properly. Okay. So in my case, I'm going to enable the Windows feature. So to do that, okay, I'm going to minimize the instructions, and I'm going to simply launch my PowerShell. All right. And here I am in PowerShell as an administrator, and I can actually start to set some of this up for myself. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this command, right? Because it's going to allow me to enable the Linux subsystem. Even though I just installed it, I like to run this command just to make sure. And it's going to run, and it's going to show me that I have now successfully enabled my Windows optional feature online. So I've enabled the Linux subsystem feature. Okay. So to download the distro, I have a command here that's explaining to me exactly what I need to do. So for your assignment, you are going to have to download the distro. Okay. So what I have to do is I can click on here to follow these instructions to specify which distro that I would like to download. And here I see there's various distros that support it. I can download Kali Linux. I can download Debian. I can download Ubuntu 16.04, Ubuntu 18.04, and OpenSUSE. Okay. So this looks very, very good. All right. So it's telling me in order to set this up, to download the distros using PowerShell, use invoke web request commandlet. Here's a sample instruction to download Ubuntu 16.04. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy this, okay? And I am going to Okay, we're not going to bring in Kali because you're going to use Kali in higher level courses. So I'm just going to bring this one in. I'm going to download the 1804. Let's take a look at the instructions for that one. Again, I have to add, close. Okay. Open. Let me cancel that. We definitely don't want to do that, but we can kind of do this on. Let's just stick to this default one for now, just because this is for demonstrating purposes. So we don't want to go too out of control with it. Okay. So from here, I'm going to bring back up my PowerShell. Let me X this out. Okay. I'm going to stick to exactly the 1604 version. I kind of wanted to download the 1804 because that's the server that we're currently using, but it's perfectly fine. And I'm going to paste this right in my PowerShell. Okay. And we're just going to allow it to download. Definitely be patient because it is going to take some time in order for it to download and complete. So it might take anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes, depending on your internet connection, to download. So definitely be patient and allow it to write and download the information that it needs to in order for it to function properly. Once it's done, I am going to take you through the steps to actually launch the Linux distro in. All right. So once our Linux distribution has completed its download, we now have to go on to the next step. So let's talk about what we just did, because I know we just basically copied and pasted something. So we need to know what we are doing and requesting. Essentially, what we did is we invoked a web request using the universal request URL, and we requested from the Microsoft server that we downloaded Ubuntu 1604. And what we're requesting is that it creates an out file named ubuntu.appx using basic parsing, which is basically the way it writes that information and delivers it to our system. The next thing that it says here that we need to do, if we take a look at the screen, I'm just showing you how you can actually follow some of the cool things that Microsoft has to offer. If I go back, it's saying that the next thing I need to do is I need to rename the file, the application file, and I need to convert it to a zip file. Once I convert it to a zip file, I need to expand that file to an archive file and name it Ubuntu. Okay. And then from there, I would execute that file. So let's actually do this to see what we are going to be doing. Okay. So what I'm going to do next is essentially the following. I'm going to do a rename -item, okay, /ubuntu.appx. So what I'm basically saying is I want to rename this file here. Okay. And I want to rename it to ubuntu.zip. Okay, I want to change it. I want to convert it to a zip file. Okay. And that will allow me to rename it to a zip file. The next thing that I want to do is I want to basically extract the file. Okay. So in order to extract the file from a zip, I have to do what's known as an expand archive. Okay. And to do that, I'm going to write expand archive ./ubuntu.zip. What am I going to expand it to? I'm going to expand it to a directory called Ubuntu. Okay. Oops. .zip Ubuntu expand archive. What did I do wrong here? .ubuntu.zip. Ah, man. See how I wrote an N at the end here? Make sure you don't. If you wrote an N at the end, make sure you write an N at the end of your zip file also. So in my case, I wrote an N at the end, so I have to make sure that I write an N at the end also. Okay. So definitely write Ubuntu, not Ubuntu. I accidentally wrote an N. So if you write an N, that will definitely throw you off. Make sure you do that. Then I'm going to go to the directory. And when I go to directory, you will notice that I have an ubuntu.zip. Make sure you write Ubuntu on yours, not Ubuntu. And I accidentally clicked N, which is nowhere near you, so I don't know how that happened. Okay. So what we need to do now is we need to switch over to our directory. Okay. So what we need to do is we need to switch to our C drive to actually access this file here named Ubuntu. So I did this part correctly because I put it in the Ubuntu folder, but I didn't name the zip folder correctly. So to switch to a C drive, I'm going to do CD, which stands for change directory, slash, space slash, which it will bring me to my C drive. And I'm going to do a CLS to clear my screen. Okay. And then once I'm in my C drive, I'm going to write a dir, and you will notice that I have now a folder called Ubuntu. All right, basically what I did is I took the files from the ubuntu.appx, I moved them to an ubuntu.zip. From the ubuntu.zip, I expanded the archive, or I extracted the file, and I created a directory called Ubuntu. Okay. So I'm going to switch to this directory, Ubuntu. And now I'm in the Ubuntu directory, and I'm going to do a dir to see what's inside that folder. And when you look inside that folder, you're going to see all of the information or the XML files that you need to actually run your Ubuntu or your Linux environment. Okay. So once I'm inside of it and I see that all of my files are here, what I need to do is now I will need to run my executable, right? Because I have an ubuntu.exe, so I need to execute that file. And if I actually want to see where this is, I can simply click here and literally go to desktop or this PC, click on my C drive, and you'll see that you have an Ubuntu file here. And you can actually just click on it right here to execute the file. Same exact thing that I'm doing here. But in my case, I'm going to do a /ubuntu.exe. Right now, I'm going to execute the file to launch the application. And it's going to take some time to install, okay, and be accessible on my system. So those are the steps that you would actually take, believe it or not, to set up and install a Linux distribution on your, or a subsystem of Linux on your Windows machine. And from there, you'll be able to create a username and a password, and you will have full access to this machine, and you can download and utilize all the tools that you would typically use in a Linux environment. Okay. And those are the steps that you would take. And if you notice, all I essentially did was I went to Microsoft's website and I took a look at exactly what they had as far as the distribution, and I followed their steps in order to complete it. Right. For extra credit, again, this is not on the assignment, but if you do it, you will get extra credit. You can actually convert the path to exactly what they're saying here. So you can add a distro path to the Windows environment for an additional 10 points on your assignment. And if you do this part to add the additional path, you will get an additional 10 points on the assignment. Okay. So that is basically how you would go about installing and setting up a Linux environment in your Windows Server 2019 using PowerShell. Okay. We're going to give it a few minutes and wait until the installation is complete so we can actually take a look at what we have. Once the installation is complete, you're going to notice that's going to say enter a username. I'm going to name it test. It's going to ask me for a password. I'm going to write 1234. Enter. I'm going to retype it again. 1234. Just again, I'm testing this. I am now in my Linux root environment. So I could do an if config, right? And you will notice that I have my internet information. I could do a sudo apt-get upgrade. If I wanted to upgrade this system, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then you'll notice no installation was done. I could do a sudo, let me do an nmcli to see if my network manager is there. So it's saying it's currently not there. So I could do a sudo apt install network dash manager, right?